Hello YouTube, welcome to Prepper Time. Today I got this thing I'm doing where I'm hopefully interviewing some people, and today's show is on Orion Darkwood, a friend of mine for a few years now. Stay tuned and listen to some good prepper stuff, will you? Hold on. Hey, yeah, Prepper Time. I know I haven't done a video in a little while, but I'm starting to kick these up, and I just got to get them air. Orion Darkwood. I doubt if that's his mom named him that, but he created what is it? East Carolina.
Eastern North Carolina Prepper.
Eastern North Carolina Prepper. Knows a lot about prepping, and hopefully that's why you're here to listen. I'm going to ask him a bunch of questions. Starting with Ryan, who are you and what is your mission? What is the mission of Eastern North Carolina Prepper?
My name's Orion Darkwood. As PrepperTime has said, it's not my real name. However, it's not because I'm trying to hide anything. It's just that a lot more people know me by Orion Darkwood than my real name. I grew up in North Carolina, about 20 miles north of Fort Bragg. I've been all around the United States. I've been to Canada and Mexico. Over the years, I grew up as a farmer. Wanted to get off the farm, got off the farm, got into the materialistic world, making good money, spending a lot of good money, and it just slowly started to dawn on me that maybe farming wasn't such a bad thing. It really started to hit home when I read a book called Lucifer's Hammer, and at that time it just kind of clicked that, hey, wait, I have absolutely no skills if all this technology and infrastructure that supports our modern life goes away. At that point, I began to basically start getting back to my roots, starting to relearn the skills of gardening, hunting, fishing. I started looking at prepper sites, and I realized one thing very early on, that a lot of the prepper sites, they had meetings, but it was just their little clique. I mean, their little group. There was no real across the board meetings. I mean, there was American Preppers Network, but I felt that was a little too widespread. So I created a group that kind of went across all the various little silo groups. Started about 2 years ago. First meeting was in January of 2012. And I expected 4 to 6 members. We had 22 show up to our first meeting. I don't have an agenda. I don't talk politics. I don't talk religion. I basically get people together to, one, network with each other, because, the whole lone wolf scenario is just asking to end badly. 2 is to, advance the skill set, to cross-train, to learn a little bit of different things that you really need to, make it in a grid, what I call a grid down situation. Lastly is, to be public, to kind of dispel the stereotypes. Media portrays preppers and survivalists in a lot of times a bad light.
I'm going to talk about the difference of that. So what is the mission? What is your goal of Eastern North Carolina Prepper?
The goal of Eastern North Carolina Preppers is, as I alluded to earlier, 1, networking with your fellow prepper, getting the preppers to come out, to talk to each other, to mix up ideas, to get to know and trust their fellow prepper. 2 is to get the various skill sets, the various ways of approaching the prepper issues, and get them out in the open, get people to teach each other, get people to learn or see things that they may have overlooked. And lastly is to present a public face to the preppers of what a real prepper is, that we're all not like wild-eyed crazy people on the side of a mountain with enough weapons to arm a third world nation.
Now, would the word Eastern North Carolina imply you're somewhere in Eastern North Carolina?
Yes, I try to limit the geographical area to, Raleigh area eastward to the coast. One thing that I am working on this year and hopefully taking off moving forward is to, within the Eastern North Carolina Prepper, create smaller localized groups to better serve the uniqueness of each particular area, such as if you were prepping on the coast, your preps would be different than if you were prepping further inland.
All right, let me ask you some questions. The terms such as prepper and survivalist often carry connotations, certain connotations, both negative and positive in society. Do you consider yourself more of a prepper or a survivalist, and what is the difference?
Um, in my mind, a prepper is more a person that has a central bug out location that is prepping for a certain event or events, whereas the survivalist is more the mentality their bug out location is wherever they happen to be at the moment. Me personally, I look at this as, just modern terms for simply, living off the land, simply, being able to be self-sufficient, at peace with one's ability to survive no matter what happens around them. Me personally, yes, I use the term prepper. My group is the Eastern North Carolina Preppers. Do I consider myself a stereotypical prepper? No.
A lot of preppers value getting together with other like minded individuals and see prepping as not only a way to get ready for emergencies, but as a fun hobby to share with others. Do you concur with that?
Um, yeah, a lot of preppers like to get together. Um, my goal is to take the preppers that are really have the mindset, really have the motivation, and teach them to get them closer together and be cold and cruel, basically weed out the ones that thinks it's a hobby, because prepping is not a hobby. Prepping is a mindset, it's a lifestyle. It requires a total change of your way of thinking and dedication. This is not something like Sunday football where you watch it for 2 hours then walk away till next weekend.
But it is a good event. It is something worth coming to and seeing, and it's not all business. It's a fun. It's a social event.
Oh yeah, the you know ever since humankind started out, the core of our existence has been our society, has been our connection to each other. And sadly, as technology advances, that core is being shaken. That core is being lost. There's a lot of people nowadays that really do not know how to truly relate, argue, debate, and interact with other humans because they've been interacting with humans through machines for so long.
Now, is this in a secret place or is everybody welcome?
Everybody is welcome. We don't discriminate. Just come. We have very few rules. No politics, no religion. Just because, not that I have anything against those two subjects. It's just that for most of my life, I've been putting together groups for business and personal adventures, and it just happens to be two subjects that I know causes the most friction. Other than that, it's just use your common sense, be an adult, come here, learn what it is, have fun, interact. We don't bite.
And how often do you meet?
Meetings are usually once a month on the second Saturday of the month. Currently, the meeting place that we have most of them at is William Umstead Park in Raleigh, North Carolina.
And all levels are welcome. Beginner
Oh
to
yeah,
expert season. It doesn't
yeah.
matter.
We have all levels, all age groups, all walks of life in our group right now.
And in fact, you'll often invite subject matter experts on a variety of prepping issues.
Oh yeah. I've been prepping for over 10 years. Do I consider myself an expert? No. And in general, you're not going to be able to become an expert at everything that you need to know in prepping. However, learning learning that learning a few things, having the right mindset, the right outlook, also being able to network with those that are the experts are key.
And like-minded. One of your focuses of your preparations is providing for other survivors of your community. How do you see your approach as different from the everyone for themselves mentality common in some of the prepper community?
I'm open because you never know who's going to have that key skill, that key item that you need. And the more people you know, the more that you're able to network, the better off you're going to be. Because in times of trouble, like the communities of old, you go to Amish country and somebody needs a barn raised, everybody is there, everybody works, there's a big meal, everybody's happy. And next week, if somebody else needs a barn raised, everybody goes there.
Team effort. Why is being prepared such a growing movement? Do you feel that it's picking up speed in
Yes. Being prepared, is a growing movement in part because of the media attention to prepper movement, but also just the fact that a lot of people are realizing that, things are unsustainable, things are very complex, our entire infrastructure is getting too complex. I mean, it's like you go to the store, you pick up an orange, you have no idea where that orange come from, who has touched that orange, what chemicals are in that orange. Not to be like a tree hugger or a raw vegan, but you know, if you can't trust where your food's coming from, if you can't trust where your water's coming from, then the motivation to have some way to to ensure that the food and water and the infrastructure that you have and enjoy is there no matter what becomes very apparent.
WWWRDgov is a government website that says we should have a plan in the event of a disaster. Would you consider that the government is encouraging people to prepare?
Well, the government, at the end of the day, they're human. They're prone to mistakes. The two examples that jump to mind is Katrina and Sandy. Where the government, FEMA, was just overwhelmed. I mean, they wanted to help. People needed the help. However, they were just overwhelmed. They were, outmatched. So, the government saying you need to prepare, it's just really common sense, despite whatever misgivings or beliefs that you have in the government. The government is, saying, okay, we may not be able to get there. We may not be able to save you. So, please don't rely on us. At least have something put away, something, minimum prepper mindset. The government recommends 72 hours. 72 hours of preparedness is actually incredibly easy to do. It's basically flashlights, food, water, shelter.
The TV show, Doomsday Prepper, highlights focus on preparing for a nuclear attack and the resulting EMP, electronic magnetic pulse fallout among other disasters. These are these scenarios which you specifically include in your preparations?
Some of the scenarios that are laid out in Doomsday Preppers are ones that I do prepare for. Some, they can happen. I mean, anything's possible. I mean, we could wake up tomorrow morning and, wake up, eat your morning cereal. Next thing you know, there's full-scale nuclear assault. There's so many things that can happen, and sadly, I think that's where some preppers get discouraged or paralyzed, is they try to prepare for everything. Me personally, I'm preparing so that no matter what happens, I have the mindset, the outlook, and skills and items I need to survive. Admitted, there are some possibilities that I simply do not prepare for because, one, the chances of them happening are very remote, and two, there are some possibilities that honestly, I, that if they happen, if there is anything left of the human race, the environment in which you find yourself is going to be near impossible to survive in.
Do you have a most likely scenario that you favor?
Right now, the most likely scenario that has happened is, it's not conjecture. It's not, oh, this is going to happen because there's some sinister. It is just mathematical possibility, and that is the collapse of our infrastructure, of our monetary system. Just from the simple fact there's, as I alluded to, there's just so many parts, so many things going on, so many basic supplies and items come from other countries that, one day they may decide, hey, we ain't going to do business with you anymore. On the opposite side, we're trillions and trillions of dollars in debt. To date, no government official has really come forward with a real concrete plan to get us out of it. And one of these days, who we borrow money from could simply say, no more. We're not going to let you borrow any more money because we think you're too big of a credit risk.
Now, an economical financial collapse would not happen overnight. If you had to, worst case scenario, put a timeline on it, we'd see it coming. Would you agree?
Well, yes, it would, but at a certain point it could collapse very quickly. The collapse very quickly is if some of the major buyers of U.S. debt, namely the central banks, the local banks, other nations, decided that credit risk is too big. They want their money now, not later. Also, if there was some nationwide breakdown of our transportation or infrastructure, such as, if all the truckers just, decided, hey, we want bigger pay, we're going to stop trucking until you pay us more. Most grocery stores, key items, they have maybe 3 days worth of supplies.
Do you think that the Doomsday Prepper TV show has helped or hurt the prepping community?
I think it's a little bit of both. It's helped in far as generating attention, generating interest. However, I think it hurts in the matter that at the end of the day, reality TV shows are entertainment. Therefore, in order to bring that entertainment, in order to bring, that interest, they're going to seek out families, seek out preppers that kind of fit more the entertainment. Most Doomsday Preppers came, they looked at me, they followed me around for the day. They would definitely pack up from boredom, because what I do is nothing spectacular, it's nothing real entertainment worthy, it's just day-to-day prepping.
Ryan, what do you feel about the term zombie used by some preppers for the unprepared? The zombie apocalypse.
It's a little bit of a derogatory term, but honestly, it is a apt one. A lot of times, I see people that, pretty much, you put some paint and makeup on them, you wouldn't, it'd be hard to tell them from, any of the zombie movies, because they're just so entrapped in their own little reality. You know, they got their smartphone, they're texting, they're not really looking at where they're going. You know, they're distracted in the car. They're just kind of going through life. They're not really doing anything. They're just kind of, for lack of a better term, fat, dumb, and happy.
What is your plan for dealing with a hostile situation? Do you have backup plan for defense if evasion is impossible? You cannot evade your...
Well, you know, I've never been in the military, but a lot of people tell me that I have a military mindset, and in that, I have plans. First and foremost, I believe that combat is the option of last resort. That is, if you run out of every other option, you have to fight. Me personally, dealing with the threats is, you know, active scouting, you know, always keeping an eye out, you know, always knowing what's going on around you, what's going on, what threats may different groups, different individual poses. Second is not having one singular defense. Pretty much, basically military mindset converted to civilian is basically an onion defense, having different layers of deterrence, you know, of detection, you know, of delay, and then finally, you know, obviously, you know, there comes a time and place where you're going to have to use force that may be lethal. Failing all that, you know, know your limits. Know when there's a battle that you are outmanned or outclassed, and having multiple escape routes, multiple ways of hiding and running away. Same thing with bug out locations. Most preppers I know, they have one bug out location. Me personally, I have 3 at the moment, including my main one, because, you know, you never know what's going to happen. There could be a fire, there could be a flood, something can occur that your bug out location may be unusable.
Well, I tell you, it brings me to one of the questions. Now, I'm pro-gun. I'm a big gun guy. You see some of my videos, and more of them are going to be competition shooting, because it's just a familiarization, and it is a hobby of mine, and I did spend a lot of time in the military. It's my preference. It's what I enjoy doing. Women have spas, men have gun ranges. But, you know, speaking from the director of this program, what is your opinion on guns and prepping?
Well, as the audience can probably figure out, I don't have enough weapons to arm a third world nation. I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment. I'm a firm believer that, you know, owning weapons is American right. However, I also say that gun safety really needs to come to the forefront. That, you know, I'm of the belief that, honestly, every high school student that takes driver's ed should take a gun safety course.
Oh, that's interesting.
As far as the weapons I own, you know, I'll be honest, I won't name specifics, but I own a weapon, and, you know, one weapon in every class. I own a shotgun, a rifle, a pistol, and an assault weapon.
I mean, if you're accumulating assets for this situation, for yourself and others, doesn't it kind of make sense to be able to protect that beans, band-aids, and bullets? You know.
Yes.
To some extent, not a militia.
Yeah.
You know, but
at the same extent, you know, it goes back to what I said. Combat is option of last resort. You know, once you fire that weapon, once you pull that knife out, once you raise that baseball bat, you know, there's skill and wisdom that helps stack the favor on one another, but there's a lot of randomness that occurs in combat that kind of evens the odds. I'd rather talk the situation out. I'd rather, you know, through, you know, negotiation, intimidation, or just plain, you know, being a ghost in the machine, and the threats pass me by. than to advertise or to invite combat.
You have 3 pet prepping locations at this time, and the question I came up with is, how do you handle food rotation with your stashes? And people have different definitions of stash. For food which has shorter shelf life, does not affect your shortage. How does that affect your choices for the foods you're storing?
Well, most of the foods that I store have at least a year shelf life. There are certain foods that you just can't store long term. Most of my meats are either canned or dehydrated. As far as a lot of the quote unquote number 10 cans, freeze dried food, I don't have a lot of it because I believe that if you got the money, you can afford it. That's one thing, but most preppers I know are not well off. So I advocate going to the store, buying things on sale. One of the things I do as far as state rotation and stuff is another one of the great mundane things of prepping is inventory control. I mean, every other month I take inventory. Check to make sure the cans are okay, check to make sure the seals are not broken. Another thing I do is, almost everything that I've got, I take a big magic marker and I write the date on top of the cans. That way, at a glance, I can see what the date is. I don't have to look around for it. Plus, there are some food items that don't have a date. They actually have a code that a lot of times you got to sit there and look up or sit there and figure it out, because a lot of the codes are like Julian dates.
Do you have a plan for water, palatable, and for washing water for animal, etc.?
My water plan is like everything else. I advocate having stored and renewable resources of food and water. As far as the water, on most of my bug out locations, there is a well. Some of them there are streams. Other than that, store water in barrels, using a little bit of bleach. Most of my stored, again, like with the food and stuff, I have dates wrote on them, like when I first set this up, and I rotate them out. Some of my water stores I've actually kind of set to a side, and I'm doing experiments where every 6 months I take a drink to see how it is, because I found out with water storage, not all storage containers are made the same. Plus, going back to food storage, expiration dates in some products actually are more of a guideline than actual, because I've done things like, I've ate food that was 3 years past its expiration date with no ill effects.
Do you have advice, Orion, for people who have a spouse or significant other that does not subscribe to prepping as a value?
Every situation is different. I don't have any specific advice. In general, usually what I have found out is the spouse or significant other, either has a bad stereotype of preppers from media, or either they don't really understand, or they don't see the need. A lot of it can be overcome by breaking it down. Not so much, okay, honey, we're preparing for a nuclear war. This is our stored stuff for the next 20 years. Turning it into something that they understand, that hits at a more level. Like, 2 years ago, 80% beef, 20% fat, sold for around $2.50 a pound. Nowadays, you're lucky to find 80-20 beef for under $3.25 a pound, and every indication of that, meat prices going up. Same thing with canned goods, same thing with milk.
Do you have any tips for people with disabilities or health concerns such as diabetes in prepping?
Each disability disease is going to be different. I speak from personal experience because I myself am diabetic. I have type 2 diabetes. And how it comes into the preps is because I have diabetes, I have to make sure that, I'm more prepared for sugar spikes and drops, that, wounds are going to take longer to heal. So, I can't take as much risk. And I hate to be cold and cruel, but some people with disabilities and diseases probably will not have a long lifespan in a grid down situation. I mean, like insulin's a question I get a lot because there's a lot of people that are on insulin. I'm fortunate in that I take oral medications. I do not take insulin. Insulin does not have a long shelf life. Most of it requires refrigeration. There are some shelf stable, but the problem is it has a very short shelf life, and there is no easy way to manufacture it. I know some preppers have been experimenting with, extracting insulin from animal pancreases. To date, I haven't heard much success from that.
What would you recommend for families or older people mixed with fixed incomes who want to start prepping but have limited money to do so?
If you have limited resources, start out slow. Don't become overwhelmed. I mean, as I said earlier, scan the grocery papers. Find those cans, canned goods on sale. Find those dry items on sale. Use coupons. The other thing, as far as the skill set, the wonderful thing about nowadays is, with YouTube, with the internet, you can sit and learn a lot of things just by looking things up online. If you don't have a computer or internet connection at home, go to your local library. Even if you don't do the internet, there are a lot of resources at your local library that can help out. There's a lot, there's a lot of, older books. If you have like a Kindle or something, there's a lot of books on Gutenberg. A lot of the old cookbooks, a lot of the old camping books are valuable assets, and they're for free.
And PrepperTime, mind you. YouTube, PrepperTime, there's some information there. Have you made mistakes through the years of preparing, and what would you redo if you had the chance?
Made mistakes, yeah, I've made quite a few. Which, the thing is, if you make a mistake, if you can learn from it, if you don't let the mistake overwhelm you, that's the key. Because I'm always saying, practice while you have the luxury of failure. If you're out there gardening and your crop doesn't come up, so what? Learn what you did wrong, learn your mistakes, so that when it does count, you have it. As far as specific examples, let's see. I've multiple crop failures for various reasons. I mean, even, from such things as forgetting to water plants, misjudging how cold it was going to get some night, forgetting to put to put blankets or pine straw around them, canning failures, not washing the jars good enough, the seals ruptured, moving the jars or not getting a firm enough grip on them, not by hand but by using a canning jar tool, not having a firm enough grip, dropping the jars, dehydrating, not dehydrating it long enough, not sealing against moisture, hunting and fishing. As far as anything that I would have to do over, the only thing that I could think of was, the only thing that I could think if I had a redo is I would have never left the farm. I would have started prepping from the time I was a kid and never left the farm and just kept on prepping.
That's interesting. What would you consider to be the weakest link for most preppers who are preparing today?
The weakest link by none is a combination of mindset and dedication. A lot of people sadly think that just by buying prepper equipment, just by buying prepper items, just by looking at Doomsday Preppers or, you know, listening to other preppers on YouTube and stuff, that somehow when it matters they will become, you know, they will become the expert. They will be the preppers. And the other is, you know, dedication is, you know, like I said earlier, it's a lifestyle change. It is, you know, a definite mindset and dedication. A lot of them are like, well, I'm good, I'm doing this, I like it, it's interesting. 6 months down the road, they're like, inventory again, do I really have to? And they just slowly fade away. I mean, and next thing you know, all the prepper goods are at the next yard sale.
Interesting stuff. Well, in closing, Orion, what would you like to tell the YouTube viewers about Eastern North Carolina prepping?
Prepping is a, you know, lifestyle. It's a mindset. I encourage everybody to do it to some extent. Our meetings are once a month on the second Saturday. If you can't come in person, go to my website, Easternncprepper.com. There's a lot of good information on there. There's plenty of links to others. You know, watch a lot of YouTube videos. You know, the grid's going to go down. It's not a if, it's a when. I mean, you know, you can wake up tomorrow and find out that, you know, a solar flare has happened, and all of a sudden we just lost the last 200 years of technology.
And how would people get in touch? I'll provide a link down at the bottom of the, right below. There's a link to his, to what? To, you have a web page, you have Facebook?
Yes,
what do you have?
I have, the main way of contact is my website, Easternncprepper.com. Email is EasternncPrepper@gmail.com.
I appreciate Orion taking his time to come and do this. You know, I tell you people, now more than ever, you know, we need this stuff. You know, comets are flying over and financial disasters and things. You know, you really need to prepare. Appreciate if you'd subscribe. Subscribe and get the word out, you know, about this. I'm trying to kick this channel off. This takes time. Commercial free. You know, notice there, I will never put a commercial of any type, any banner on this channel. So come back, watch it, and hopefully I'm going to have bigger and better. But they don't get much better than Orion Darkwood. Thanks for coming out, Orion. God bless you guys. Subscribe, like. Come back. Thanks. Bye.